So today I am going to talk about our overnight success that has taken more than 9 years and share a few lessons that we've learned along the way. So as I was preparing for this talk, I was wondering, what can I possibly say in the next 20 minutes that could possibly help you along your entrepreneurial journey? I hear there's a lot of entrepreneurial people in this room. And I realized there's two things. Firstly, to share that it's possible, and secondly, to share that it's hard. Now, this might sound a little bit demotivational, but in fact, I think these are the two most important things that I've learned that could possibly equip you for the time and journey ahead. So firstly, it's possible. I learned this when I met Lars Rasmussen, who co-founded Google Maps. And I was sitting across from the table from him, and I realized he's just a regular person. He, for some reason in my head, was this crazy alien from another planet that had created something incredibly, insanely out of this world. But actually, he was just a normal person that tried really, really hard. And secondly, it's hard because it's meant to be. When I started Canva, we had no idea of the incredible journey and the incredibly hard things that we'd have to do along the way. And when we were getting rejected and when we were failing and things weren't going out in the way that we wanted, we thought that it was just us. But actually realizing that every single entrepreneur goes through those same challenges is such an important and powerful thing to learn. So what I'm going to do today is share with you my journey, because hopefully I can share it's possible and it's hard. So my journey began when I was at university and I was teaching design programs part-time. And students would struggle learning these programs that were really, really complex. So this was a photo from my university, UWA in Perth. That's where my hometown is. And so students were struggling learning these programs that were really, really complex. It would take a whole semester for students just to learn the very basics. And I realized that in the future it was going to be completely different. It was all going to be online and collaborative and really simple. But not only are these programs really difficult and complex, they have to go and do this crazy complex system. So you go and purchase Adobe, then you study design for a few years, then you purchase and download stock photos from a stock photography library. If there's any designers in the audience, they probably know this system very well. They go to a font library and purchase and download fonts. They go to a layout library and purchase and download layouts. They deep etch each image and prepare each vector. This is to design anything, presentations, pitch decks, social media graphics, anything that looks professional. Receive photos and content via email and go backwards and forwards many times. Then design, so you take all these elements and actually create a design. Then you upload and email the PDF and make revisions going backwards and forwards. And then you finally prepare that design for web or print. So this crazy process is insanely complex and completely doesn't utilize the technology that we have available. And so we thought we'd integrate the entire design ecosystem and make it really, really simple. And so rather than people having to go to all these different programs, they could just go into one platform and have the entire system at their fingertips. So we'd have a stock photography library that anyone could go and access. We'd have a font library, a layout library, and everyone, even if you've had absolutely no design experience, could design that beautiful presentation or pitch deck or social media graphics. So this was our vision, our grand, grand vision for changing the world of design. But the reality was, I was a university student, I was 19, and I had absolutely no business experience or marketing experience or product experience or any experience that would be somewhat relevant to creating a world-changing company. And so what we did was my boyfriend became my business partner, he's in the audience today, and we took over my mum's living room and we put printing presses in, and we started employing staff out of her living room and just started taking over the house gradually and started to build a company. And so rather than trying to take on the entire world of design when we had no experience, we decided to take on a niche market. So we enabled school yearbooks in Australia to create amazing yearbooks online. So we could have the entire school collaborating and creating that yearbook online. And so this is us with our very first website. We couldn't have been more excited. We got a software engineering company to come and design this product for us, to come and develop this product for us. And we were extremely proud and a little dorky. And even more dorkier here. But we started to grow our company. And it was really exciting because we started to employ staff and we started to see the company growing every single year. We did reinvest our profits. At this stage, we had no investment. We were growing organically. We were what's called bootstrapping. And then the dorkiest photo that I think I'm going to show you today. But we used to wear suits to absolutely everything because we thought it was very businessy. And so we went to this conference called WA Inventor of the Year, and this is actually what we're doing today, but with a much less cool marketing term. So the world's most sophisticated and easy to use multi-user publishing system. It's a little bit comical, but what was cool was we were trying to build this all the way back in 2008. And as a result of that conference, I met Bill Tai, who was an investor from over in Silicon Valley, and we had a 5-minute conversation, and he said if I went to Silicon Valley, he'd be happy to invest. And so I jumped on a plane to Silicon Valley 6 months later and presented the future of publishing. Now, the embarrassing thing was this was actually a paper pitch deck printed on my printing presses in my mom's living room. And he was like, do you have an iPad? And I was like, nope. It was very awkward. But the funny thing was we were sitting there having lunch, and I'm trying to present the future of publishing, and he was eating his lunch and text messaging, and I was like, why are you text messaging? I'm trying to present the future of publishing. Are you not listening to me? And I thought that he actually was completely not interested in my company after I'd flown from Perth all the way to San Francisco. But when I got back, he'd actually sent me was sending messages to his network and was inviting me to have a conversation with those people. So he was introducing me to a whole bunch of people, which was very exciting and crazy. And he said that if we could find a technical co-founder, he'd be happy to invest. And so a whole year of trying to find a technical co-founder later. So I was going to conferences, I was going to cold calling people, emailing people, doing whatever I possibly could in order to get people to come on board. And there was just a lot of rejection during that stage. But finally, we found an amazing co-founder. Cameron Adams joined us. And so at this stage, we thought raising funds is going to be a walk in the park. We've built a profitable company, we've grown like crazy, we've been able to expand internationally, we've been able to build a product, going to Silicon Valley, getting investment, it's going to be a cinch. That was unfortunately totally not the case. So we were just faced with a wall of problems and rejections and questions. Everything from who cares to I don't understand your industry, it's too ambitious, it's not ambitious enough, it's too niche. You're the same as some random company we've never heard of. It scares me. Are you just a talker? I don't know you from a bar of soap. This constant rejection. I revised my pitch deck over 100 times. So when you're faced with a wall of rejection, what do? You have two options. You can stop, probably like most sane people, or you can persist over and over and over again until eventually you land investment. That's what we did. And so this is a really cool chart that shows how Bill Tai, the guy that I showed you in one of the first slides, introduced me to all these different people who then introduced me to other people. So these are the ones that all, of course, worked out. But there was many, many more of people that actually we pitched, and of course, it didn't actually work out. We've ended up with over 60 investors. But what was so incredibly exciting was that as a result of all of this, we started to build the team of incredible software engineers and designers to actually start to build Canva. And so this is us outside our first office here in Surrey Hills, or just nearby in Surrey Hills. And after another year of development, we were very excited to finally launch Canva. It had been a long time in the making at this point. And so we were actually able to combine that entire design ecosystem and make it really simple for people to design. It was incredibly exciting and incredibly rewarding to finally get it out into the world. And very excitingly, we started to grow like crazy. And so 8 months in, we had over 350,000 designs created per month. We couldn't believe it. Every single month was growing much more rapidly than the month before. And we were like, wow, this is actually working. We weren't just crazy. And then 20 months in, you can see that those little white bars there, they look a lot smaller. And they're dwarfed by the 2.9 million designs created per month, 20 months in. And then, now we have over 9 million designs created per month. And it was pretty impressive even to us. We've got over 10 million users from 179 countries across the globe. And this is our awesome team. We've got now over 100 people in our team. But when you hear these numbers, even to me, 9 million just seems like a crazy number. I can't even comprehend that. But when you hear one of the stories, so we've had a sheriff in the US who's creating wanted posters with Canva, and we've had all sorts of crazy things being created. Charities using Canva to raise money for their charity, small businesses using Canva to get their business off the ground, and so much community love. It just completely warms our heart. This is what our team has been doing this entire thing for, is to help people create incredible designs and to do things they didn't even know was possible. And we started to get some incredible investors on board, even more still, so celebrity investors, and we're named the coolest company and all sorts of other crazy things. But that, of course, is my highlight reel. What you read in TechCrunch is, of course, companies' highlights. What you're reading in the press anywhere is people's highlights. Even when I'm trying to articulate how challenging it is to start a company, it's the highlights. And so it's so important to realize this. If you're starting out on an entrepreneurial journey, if you're trying to achieve anything, this is one of my favorite quotes for that very reason. The reason we struggle with insecurity is because we compare our behind the scenes with everyone else's highlight reel. Isn't this true? It's so important to know that every single entrepreneur is going through struggles. It's a really challenging journey to get to where they are. And what you read is, of course, the parts that are highlighted, the parts that are in people's highlights reel, where I actually think the funny thing is that the things that I deserve the most congratulations for is when things are really hard and challenging, when we're hitting great user numbers. It's very happy times. It's great to celebrate those things. But the things that entrepreneurs really need celebration is for those challenging times, that struggle. And so what I thought I would do right now is share with you a note that I wrote to myself, a very low moment from back in 2011. And so this was when I was in San Francisco for 3 months, and I was trying to find a technical co-founder. It was a year later that we actually found one. But I was going to so many conferences and going to so many different things and just facing rejection after rejection after rejection. And it's not that nice. In fact, I think the sane reaction to rejection is to stop being rejected. But if you are an entrepreneur, or if you are trying to achieve something big, you just keep on pushing through and keep on trying and trying and trying and doing something at breakfast, lunch, and dinner and going to every conference under the sun. So this is the note that I wrote to myself. Mel, you're extremely tired. You are in a challenging situation, though you can pull through. Nothing bad is really happening. You're just feeling depressed because you are used to achieving things quickly. It's a hard environment. There is no doubt you will succeed, and you will find the team you need, get the investment you need, and build the company you have always wanted. You have chosen to put yourself in a challenging situation. If it wasn't challenging, you wouldn't feel as satisfied when you get to the end goal. So that was back in 2011. And I'm actually pretty proud of myself for writing such a wise message to myself, because evidently I was going through a hard time, but evidently I knew the advice that I needed to give to myself: get to bed and you're going to be able to push through. So I think that it's just important to know that everyone who's starting out on an entrepreneurial journey, or even many years down the track, there's always hard times. There's always times where you don't know whether things are going to work out or not, but you just keep on persisting. So why take on such epic challenges if it's going to be so damn hard? Well, I think because it's fun. I think that some people are just wired to want to take on challenges. If something's challenging, that's the thing that I want to do in general. And also the ability to build something world-changing, to be able to have an impact, that's pretty damn cool too. Here's an 85-year-old's perspective. So this is one of my favorite quotes, favorite poems of all times. I read it when I was about 15, and it's had a really strong influence on my life. It's from an 85-year-old in a nursing home, and she writes, if I had my life to live over, I dare to make more mistakes next time. I'd relax, I would limber up. I'd be sillier than I've been this trip. I would take fewer things seriously. I would take more chances. I would eat more ice cream and less beans. I would perhaps have more actual troubles, but fewer imaginary ones. So I think what's so awesome about this poem is that if you make every decision in your life based on what would I like to have done in my life looking back, what legacy would I like to leave, what crazy adventures are worth going on because it's going to be a great story in the end, then it sort of gives you a pretty cool slant to view the world. So I want everyone to think, do you have a wild, outlandish dream? Something that you're like, that is just crazy, but if I did that, how awesome would it be? And think about that, talk about that, dream about that, and talk about it when you go home to your friends and your family every single day. And the more that you visualize this, the more that you think about the dream that you want to live, the life that you want to create, and the more that that will be actually turned into the reality. In fact, it's the only way it will ever turn into a reality. So what I thought I'd do right now is share with you 10 very practical tips for doing something awesome. The first is an extremely practical one. So every single person going to a business meeting the first thing that you do is shake someone's hand. And you don't normally get a lesson in life on how to shake somebody's hand. In fact, it's something that you probably will never get told if you have an absolutely terrible handshake and destroy every single business meeting going forward. So what we're going to do right now is exactly that. We're going to have a lesson on shaking people's hands. So this is from WikiHow. So the very first thing one must do is extend your right hand towards the intended recipient of your handshake. Your palm should be perpendicular to the ground. We're going to be putting this into practice, so listen very closely. Hold your arm so that it is parallel to the ground, ensuring that your thumb points upwards. So this is how you start every investor meeting, every time you meet a new staff member, every time you are talking to a partner. This is the one lesson that you need to be able to perfect. We actually did this exercise with our team, and a lot of people discovered that their handshake wasn't quite up to scratch. So when the recipient of your gesture offers his or her hand, engage this completely with your own so that the palms of your hands touch. Give their hand a firm yet gentle squeeze, simultaneously administering one downward shake that travels about 3/4 of an inch. Now this is important, you don't want it to be too aggressive. Refrain from wiping your hand on a pant leg towel or other nearby accessory. So now what I want you all to do is to turn to your neighbour and give them a terrible handshake. Literally break every single one of the rules I just showed you. Excellent. Okay. That's some seriously bad handshakes. And now what I want you to do is turn to your neighbour and give them a great handshake. But I also want you to critique your neighbour's performance. Give them a rating out of 10. Absolutely. Excellent. So when you go home and you're talking to your friends or your team or your family, go and give them some hot tips about handshakes. Some people in our office learned that they had too much of a cup in their handshake. There's many, many things wrong. But if you shake someone else's hand and give them great feedback, they'll be able to improve their handshake that will help them throughout their business endeavours. So the second thing is quite an important one also. It's really important to find a problem that people care about. So if you are solving a problem that people care about, it's going to be your best marketing. Because all of a sudden, when you actually get to the point that you have your product and you're trying to market it, people care about it. So imagine if I had done all of those things, spent all of those years trying to start this company, and then we launched the product and no one cared. One really great way to reassure yourself and make sure that doesn't happen is to solve a problem that people deeply care about, because they're going to then care about your solution. Another really important thing to do is to start niche and then go wide. So when we started out, we had no business experience, etc. We had no experience that was very relevant at all. But what we did was start with school yearbooks in Australia, which meant that we could really solve the pain points for Australian schools, and we could really have a solution that solved their problems, which was fantastic. And then once we built all of that experience, we were then able to take it and try and solve lots more problems of the entire design ecosystem. Another really great thing is to create a strong vision and a plan to get there. So what you don't want is this ladder on the left-hand side, which is like, you get to the top and you wonder, like, what do I do next? I don't really have much of a vision. My whole vision was the things that I've already done. You see a lot of companies in that sort of boat. What you want to do, you also don't want to have a vision that's just the rungs. just the rungs without the actual steps. Because if you do that, then you get to the end, you never actually get started. You have this wild, crazy dream, but you never actually put in those steps to start the process. What you do want to do is have an ideal vision, which is a crazy, crazy dream for what the future will look like, and then take little steps every day to get there. And so it's really important. Something that I think people don't do enough is dreaming. Just dreaming, what is the future of communications going to look like? What's the future of transport going to look like? What's the future of whatever industry it is going to look like? And when you start to really believe that, and when you get a really clear idea of what that looks like, and then you create a company in that sort of swell, going along that path, then that really creates a great environment to create a company, and means that as the future goes forward, for me, it's been 9 years later, it means the world will catch up to where you believe, hopefully, the future will be. And I think it's also really important to know that to succeed at anything takes many, many attempts. There is actually no one, I've never spoken to an entrepreneur that's had it easy, that things just worked out instantly for them. It just doesn't happen to anyone. The world is kind of set up, and it's got the companies in place that aren't really going to want you to succeed. And every single structure in the whole world is designed not for your company to succeed, but just to exist as it currently is. And so for you to succeed at something means that you're going to have to go against the grain, and it's going to be a bit of a challenge. And so eventually, if you just keep on trying, eventually it pays off. And this applies to absolutely every single thing, to our team, to investment, to everything that we've ever done. It just takes many, many attempts. You just have to keep on being rejected until eventually someone will accept you. It takes attempts time and time again. So I think when you think about that crazy, wild, outlandish dream that you'd like to achieve, you have to ask yourself, how many times are you prepared to try and fail in order to make that happen? So you want to think crazy, wild, big, something that really inspires you. Because if you're not prepared to try and fail, you're probably not going to get there. Another great thing is to seek excellence. Go to the epicenter, read great blogs. There's so much great knowledge available on the internet that you can just take for free and use that. So for us, going to San Francisco was really, really beneficial because it meant that we got to speak to people who'd created world-changing companies. There's so much knowledge available online. Take advantage of that. There's some really great blogs, like Paul Graham's blog's fantastic. Another really fun thing is to learn about yourself. As you are starting a company or taking on any endeavor, joining a startup, it's so important to know about yourself and to be able to utilize that information, to be able to make great decisions, to be able to build stronger relationships. For me, doing this personality test was one of the funnest things I've done. It's 16personalities.com, and it takes about 12 minutes and it's completely free. But it's really interesting to get that insight into yourself. Knowing yourself is such an important part of the journey, as you'll have so many highs and lows, and knowing what makes you tick is incredibly important. Another really important thing is to not do it alone. So for me, I was very fortunate to have Cliff very, very early on in the piece, and then Cameron, and then our entire incredible team. But even before you have enough money to hire any staff, and even if you don't have a technical co-founder or an amazing other co-founder, it's important to hire people early on and to be able to outsource that work as quickly as possible. So you can use things like Upwork and Freelancer to get incredible people on board quickly, and to help learn to be able to give out work to other people rather than trying to do it all yourself, because it means that you can grow so much more quickly. Another really important thing that you may have gathered is that it's incredibly important to love challenges. That's the only thing that has been standard from the last 9 years of having a business, is that there's constant challenges. In the first stages, it was the challenge to get the product started, to actually become profitable, otherwise we'd have no company because we had no investment, et cetera, along the way. Now with 100 people, there's all sorts of different challenges that we need to deal with. But loving them is a really important aspect. It's also really important to find your own flavour. So if you read in the newspaper or you read on a blog or whatever you're reading, you hear about other companies and what they do. And you've all got the expectations of what a company is, but it's so important to find your own flavour and to not think that you have to do something because that's the way another company works. So for us, one of our values is to ceremoniously celebrate wins along the way. And this is a lot of fun. So what we actually do is now we have 100 people. We've split into small startups. And each startup in our team has their own missions and goals. And when they hit a goal, we ceremoniously celebrate. And so we do all sorts of funny things. We've released doves. That's actually a thing. We've smashed Greek plates. We've had a ribbon cutting ceremony when we opened a new floor. We've, every time we hit 1 million users, we'd go out and have schnitzel for lunch. It was quite funny. We've had a chef. We have 3 amazing chefs now, actually, in our office. But in our very, very early days, when we were sitting around my mum's living room, we'd have lunch together as a team. And these were often just leftovers from the fridge. It didn't need to be anything fancy. But having lunch together has been such an incredibly important part of our company, because it means that you get to know people as friends. And it means that you start to actually care about each other, which makes working together a lot more fun. So the final step that I was going to explain is that it's really important just to take your first step. So you saw with that ladder, if you don't take your first step, you're never going to get there. You're just going to have this crazy, wild, outlandish dream that you never achieve. So it's really important to take the first step. This is a photo of me when I was 14, and this was my first business experience. So I made scarves, and I sold them to women's boutiques around Perth. But it was such an important and valuable learning experience for me, because it meant that I actually was able to create something of value and was able to then actually sell that and market it. And it was really important because it meant throughout my entire life I've had this knowledge that it's possible, which has been really helpful. So if you have a crazy, wild, outlandish dream, that's awesome. If you don't, this weekend, just go and figure out how you can make $100. Because as soon as you make $100 from anything, and you've been able to make that yourself, you realize that it's possible. Or if you're wanting to go and join an incredible startup, just go and do it. Canva's definitely hiring. So I hope that today I have been able to explain, and I hope that you've been able to deeply know that it's possible if you want it badly enough, and it's hard because it's certainly meant to be. Thank you.
Have a seat. Thank you, Mel. So I'm going to start perhaps back at kind of high school. We have a bunch of high school students out there. Can you shout, everyone who's from high school? Yeah. Tell us kind of your advice to these guys right now. I think, we've got year 10, year 11, year 12. Should they be choosing subjects in a certain way? Should they be thinking about university? Should they be thinking about starting businesses? Any words for those guys?
Great question. I think one of the best things that you can possibly do is to put your heart and soul into every single thing that you're doing. And that's something that I did from very early on. I think it was just innate. But if you really are trying hard, so if you're trying really hard in your subjects, if you're trying really hard in absolutely every single thing you're doing, extracurricular activities, it means what you're doing not is just getting good grades, but you're learning that you can achieve. If you're putting hard work into things, that you can actually, it pays off. Which is an incredibly valuable lesson, because it means that you can then take on bigger and bigger challenges and have confidence in yourself that eventually you'll be able to see it through. And also, if you're not taking STEM subjects, do.
Take STEM subjects, guys.
Some of the most important things you can possibly do is to even go into Code Academy and start learning to be a software engineer, because there's just so much valuable information that's available for free. And also, everything is moving online, so you'll be at the forefront.
So you mentioned about coding, and Cliff and you are not tech founders in that you can't build the product yourself. And I'm sure there's lots of non-tech founders out in the audience. And one of the questions we get at Blackbird so often is just, I'm a non-tech founder. How do I find this tech founder? How do we come together? Where do I find tech founders? And how do I know that the right one is that person? Go a little bit deeper on how you found Cam. And then how you convinced him to kind of team up with you guys, because I know he's a really important part of
Definitely.
Canva.
So actually, for our first company, we hired a software engineering company. Yeah. And that was really valuable, because at that stage, we didn't have the credentials to be able to really attract another technical co-founder because we didn't have much experience. And so being able to actually hire a software engineering company was really valuable for us because it meant that we were able to build up our own product and marketing and business experience. And then we thought it'd be easy to find a technical co-founder. It totally wasn't. It was like a year of trying to find people and pitching every single person under the sun. And then it was actually Lars Rasmussen, the co-founder of Google Maps, who introduced us to Cam.
So Bill Tye, who you met in Perth at a conference, kind of a little bit like this.
Exactly like this, yes.
Introduced you to Lars, founder of Google Maps.
Yes.
And Lars had worked with Cam, is that right?
Yes, that's exactly right.
And introduced you guys. Okay, so you met Cam.
Yeah.
How do you convince him to join you?
It was actually quite funny. So we met Cam and he had another startup at the time. And he said that he was really interested. And so we were just asking him for some advice about our startup. And then a few months later, he messaged and said that he couldn't get Canva out of his head. So it was very fortunate. We couldn't have been more excited to get him on board. Dave Herndon as well. So he is our tech lead. We actually were trying to convince him to join Canva. But Google didn't want to lose him because he's a pretty incredible engineer. And so we actually ended up creating a visual pitch deck that we were like, it was quite funny. We created this fairy tale of him joining us and how life was going to be wonderful. And in pictures that we took from his Facebook page, it was hilarious. Anything to get it to work. And eventually he joined from that as well. Yeah,
fantastic. So I'm going to take you back to kind of about the time I first met you over in Perth, and you had Fusion Books was up and running. How much did you know about Silicon Valley, and how much did you know about venture capital at that point?
The ironic thing is I knew absolutely nothing. So we'd had a company for several years, but we knew nothing about the whole world of startups and Silicon Valley and venture capital. So we just created this company that was in a little bubble for us. We had a problem and we wanted to solve that problem, and it was annoying because when we went to the bank, we couldn't get a loan because we didn't have much of a credit history. And then we met you and Bill, and it was an incredible learning curve for us. So I spent so much time over in Silicon Valley, and just realizing there was a whole world of people out there that were like us was pretty incredible.
Doing the same thing. And how I remember you came to meet us at a dinner that we had, and there were probably 15 people at that dinner, and most of them were from Silicon Valley. How did you guys feel as you arrived at that?
So intimidating. We walked in.
And yet they're very friendly people. You're good friends with most of them now, right?
Very friendly people, but it was absolutely crazy because Bill was the first person we'd ever met from Silicon Valley, and then there was a whole room full of these people that were very successful entrepreneurs, and we felt completely out of place, but we tried our hardest anyway to try and make a good impression and to get.
Well, you did make a good impression, but I've got to bring you back to a pitch that you gave us that night, and the company had a different name then. Are we allowed to name the name?
It was way less cool. Canvas Chef.
Canvas Chef. And
because you take all these different ingredients and you put it together, that was the idea. But
and the pitch, in fact, had pizzas on it, I remember. It was a pizza base, and then there were things.
I really like visual metaphors.
and actually, I think as I was thinking back, as I was preparing for today and thinking back about that time that I met you, quite a few years ago now, I think what strikes me is that if I look at Canva now, in fact, the vision is very similar, very, very similar. The way you articulate it, obviously, is far more sophisticated, after hundreds of pitches. But the vision is very tight still around what you wanted to do. Yeah. Have you seen that vision changing? Will the vision change? Does it get bigger as Canva grows? How do you feel about that vision?
The vision has been very, very much the same from early on. So we're still actually realising things that were in the pitch deck from many years ago, which is quite exciting. So over the coming months, we've got a few more things being released, but I don't think it'll be until the end of next year that we've actually realised the things that were in the pitch deck back from 2011 or even earlier, which is kind of crazy. But as we, of course, have been growing, we're definitely getting it deeper and defining it and refining it a lot more. But it's been very much the same from the early days. It feels incredible to actually get to turn that crazy idea into a reality.
I'm just going to pause. Slido, give a plug for Slido. Ask us questions. Good. There we go. Type in your questions and tweet as well, please. So next question is kind of founders go, maybe they've learned a bit about Silicon Valley. I think, as you said, one of the wonderful things, Silicon Valley used to be this closed club, and even when you first were getting involved in a very closed club, but now everyone's blogging and tweeting and snapping and whatever elsing. And so it's now possible for someone sitting in Australia to learn a lot about Silicon Valley.
Definitely.
Before you even go there. But so lots of founders do that now in Australia, and then they jump on a plane to San Francisco and they head over and they've booked themselves 2 weeks to go and raise their money for their business. What's it really like when you arrive in Silicon Valley?
Well, I have to say, I booked my plane ticket for 2 weeks as well, and then stayed till my visa expired twice. So I think that it just takes a long time. Like, the first time I thought I would go over, raise money in 2 weeks, head back, and then a year later I went back and did the exact same thing again. It takes a long time to build up your networks. It takes a long time to build that trust. One of the most important things that we did was we said that we were going to do something, and then we did that thing, and then that builds up a lot more trust because people actually believe that you're going to be able to do the next thing that you say. And when you do that a few more times, then that's actually how we ended up raising our first round. But it certainly takes a lot of time and a lot of persistence.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I tell Aussie founders is that in actual fact, you think it's going to be really easy when you get over to Silicon Valley, but there's just so much noise there. There's so many other people starting businesses that it's actually really hard to sort of step above that noise and get noticed by companies. Let's talk a little bit. Let's come sort of forward in time now. Business has started, and you're building your engineering team here, right here in Sydney. And I guess having been to Silicon Valley, raised money from some of the very top VCs in Silicon Valley, there was some pressure probably to move the team over to San Francisco, to put the engineers there, hire engineers and headquarters in San Francisco. Why are you still in Sydney, and are you going to stay in Sydney?
We're definitely going to stay in Sydney.
Yeah.
It was very challenging to get investors from Silicon Valley to let us actually stay in Australia. So there was a huge push. We were asked every single time we were having meetings, when are you moving the company over to San Francisco? People said they couldn't invest because we're an Australian company. It was actually quite challenging. But eventually we found some firms that believed in us enough to let us stay here. But we also were able to get commercialisation Australia, which meant that we were able to say that we were able to have the money go further. And then also we ended up finding some really great tech people here, which meant that we could start that as the nucleus. But I couldn't be more glad that we were able to do that, because hiring incredible engineers has been a lot easier here than in San Francisco, where it's a lot more competitive and people were skipping ship all the time. I think that we've definitely ended off better for it, but it was certainly challenging.
Yeah. We have a theory that we tell lots of people in Silicon Valley that it costs about a third when you factor in all the R&D tax credit, the Aussie dollar at the moment, the cost of living, because San Francisco's, Sydney's bad, but San Francisco's gone through the roof. It costs about a third, really, to hire a great tech team. And they stay, right? And
you get people who are a lot more loyal and a lot more excited about what you're trying to do and the vision, as opposed to there, I think it's a bit more of a commodity.
Do you think VCs over in Silicon Valley are starting to get that? Do they get it with you guys now?
They definitely get it now. Yeah, it's fantastic that we aren't getting that question anymore.
Okay, so product. Product is super important, and as you know at Blackbird, we're all about founders who are product founders, and that can mean they're tech founders, they can actually write the product, or it can mean they are the kind of visionaries around product. And I know that's you with Canva. How close are you still to the product? With 100 people working in the business, have you had to give up bits of the product design, or is that still something you spend a lot of time on?
So we have a lot of incredible product designers now, and actually everyone in the company plays a role. So the user voice feeds back into the product. The engineering team often have really great ideas about how we can improve the product. So the product is something that's forefront for our entire company. One of our philosophies is to maximize customer happiness, and we take that really seriously. But I'm still very much embedded in the product. Getting to realize that vision from early on and actually seeing that get out into people's hands is one of the most exciting things. But also we've moved into this model of little startups. So enabling the teams to really take control, but then I'm able to be embedded in the strategic part or maybe the more macro part of the product. So, but it's still very, very close to my heart.
Yeah, I think as we look at a lot of the great companies that have been built both in Silicon Valley and here, the fact that there's that founder vision embedded in the product is just so important.
Thanks.
So next, I think we might take a few questions from the audience. Let me bring them up. Can we get them up on? Here we go. There's a good one to start with. Were you ever worried someone would steal your ideas and run away with them? And I'm going to add a little bit onto that. Did you ever ask anyone to sign an NDA when you went to tell them your idea?
Yeah, so remember that photo of me in the business suit with Cliff? We were getting everyone that we spoke to sign NDAs because back in 2008 we thought someone was going to run away with the idea. Fortunately now in 2016 we're still getting to lead the charge. But back in 2008 we thought that if we spoke to someone about our idea, they'd steal it. Realising how hard it is to build a company, I realised that wasn't quite accurate. So now I would advise you to talk to everyone because that talking to people gives you that feedback loop, enables you to refine your pitch and the way you're explaining it. But certainly early on in our business days, we really thought that people would just take the idea because it was so obvious to us that this is the future, and if we told someone, we thought they'd just nick it.
So no NDAs when you go and talk to investors,
We don't get
right?
anyone to sign NDAs anymore at all.
No NDAs, guys.
Embarrassingly, I sent one to Bill, and he didn't sign it.
He didn't sign it. All right. What was the best thing you did in the early days to recruit new users and engage them? And maybe if I, again, change that a little bit, first 1,000 users, what did you do to get them and engage them?
I'm going to give you two answers to that. So the first one was for Fusion Books. So what we did with Fusion Books was we sent out a sample school yearbook to every school in Australia. We'd have my incredible family helping to pack these envelopes, and we'd send out several campaigns a year, which was really effective. And that actually meant that we were able to get brand awareness, and it was a really great way to get straight into the yearbook coordinator's hands. It was a very manual process, as you can imagine. With Canva, we're a lot more fortunate in that we already had quite a bit of exposure in the media because we'd had raised capital from some great people. But also what we were able to do was, I think back to that solving a problem. Because we solved a problem that really affected people, it dramatically helped because it meant that when people found out about Canva, they were able to then tell other people because they thought it was cool. But also what we did was concentrate on social media marketers and bloggers. And so these are people that were going to use Canva most frequently. And they also were people that were quite loud and talked to a lot of people at the same time. So concentrating on social media marketers and bloggers was really strategically helpful for us.
Yeah, great. Well, you don't have to answer this. With 60 investors, how much equity did you need to let go? Perhaps we change that a little bit and talk a little bit about like how important is dilution, and when is it worth diluting your equity in order to get capital and great people? Because you also dilute with employee share plans, and I think people forget that a lot.
Yeah.
How do you feel about dilution versus capital and employees?
So all of our team have shares in Canva. It's quite common in startups, especially in Silicon Valley. With dilution, you can kind of have a small pie, the whole small pie thing. So if you've got a small pie, obviously you can have 100% of it. But if you're trying to build a world-changing company that does crazy things, it's important to be able to expand that pie, and then you end up with a bigger piece of it, a smaller piece of a bigger pie. Yeah. So I think that's been, our intent very early on was to create a big company that is going to change the world. So it's been important to be able to just take on incredible investors and draw upon their experiences and to have the capital to be able to expand and grow like crazy. But I think it's also really important to know that when you take on capital, you need to know exactly what you're doing right from the get-go. You don't want to be experimenting and trying to pivot and trying to figure out what you're doing as you go along. Essentially, when you get that capital, there's such an important pressure to be able to either become profitable really quickly or to be able to get to that next value inflection point. Because if you don't, you won't have a company because you've obviously expanded your expenses. So it's really important. It's like a time bomb. Essentially, you want to make sure that when you raise capital, you know what you want to do and you know how you're going to execute. So I wouldn't take on capital prematurely. You want to really know what you're doing before you do so.
And I know, let's touch a little bit on revenue, because I know a lot of Australian kind of founders and investors think that everything's about revenue from day one, and that's the only way to really prove you have a real business. I know you guys really focus on growth, and in fact, are probably still focusing on growth, probably at the expense of revenue. How did you guys feel about that, and how did investors feel about that?
Yeah. So again, I'll give a twofold answer to that one. So with Fusion Books, we bootstrapped, we had no external funding. So it was really important that we became profitable, we'd have no company very quickly. Yeah. But then at the same time, with Canva, what we wanted to do was we want Canva to be used by every single person with an internet connection. So we have quite bold ambitions there. Yeah. And so it was really important that we were able to grow as quickly as we possibly could. And then we were also able to get great investors who were supporting that belief. But I think that there's also a caveat to that, which is that we were growing knowing that we were creating a company that people would be prepared to pay for, because it's about the workday, it's about productivity. Yeah. And so I think that some startups think that they can grow and never have a monetization plan, never have the ability to actually get people to pay for the product that they're creating. And so with us, I feel like we've kind of got the best of both worlds, because we've been able to grow like crazy, but then also we've known that even from the very early days that Canva would be something that people would be prepared to pay for. Yeah. And as we've introduced Canva for Work late last year, we've definitely seen that that's actually the case.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I lost my... Did you use Canva for your presentation?
Of course.
That's an easy one.
Yes.
We've answered half of this one, which is the Silicon Valley bit, but someone's asking, why didn't you stay in Perth? I think that's a good question.
That is a good question.
And I know we have some people from Perth in the audience.
Who's from Perth here?
Yeah.
Excellent. My dad is here as well.
Yay.
Why didn't I stay in Perth?
Yeah.
It was sort of the way things unfolded for us. So going over to Silicon Valley, we met great investors there. We also met great investors here based in Sydney. We also realised that building out the engineering team was going to be really difficult in Perth. It's a lot easier because there's a lot more people here in Sydney. Yeah. And we've been able to actually fly people from all parts of the world come and work here. Yeah.
And I have to say, just a little plug for Perth out there. Hi, if you're watching on the stream. It is really growing. The ecosystem is starting to really gather momentum. There's some great centres of the ecosystem now. So let's hope that continues to happen.
Yes, definitely. On that note, I think it was one of the most beneficial things ever for us to be based in Perth to start off with. We're protected from the world. We're able to really grow and experiment and learn a lot of things. It was an incredibly useful thing to be based in Perth to start off with.
Okay, here's one. I'm a high school student with a design that I would like to get up and running. Where would be a good place to start getting investors?
That's a really great question. So back to my time bomb analogy. Yeah. I think one of the first things that you can do is so you've got this big, bold dream of what you want to do, figure out how you can create that first step. That first thing that could be a little product that you're creating, go and actually get as far along as you possibly can. Because the benefit of actually being able to create a company before you get incredible investors on board, well, firstly, they don't actually want to invest when you're really, really early. Yeah. But secondly, when you start to build out that company and start to actually create that into a thing, you have a lot more leverage in negotiation. So the further along that you can get before you take on investment, the more that you'll actually be able to do as far as the company goes, because you have built a lot more value. So try and build as much value as you possibly can. But I think just go and get started today, tomorrow, because as soon as you start, you'll learn so much from that experience and you'll be in a much better place to take on investment later down the road. But start to put together your pitch deck, because you'll be refining that pitch deck for years to come. We're still refining it all the time. So once you've started to get the pitch deck together, it's really helpful because it really helps to tell your story and to communicate your vision. And
often your first investors are your parents and your friends.
Definitely.
And your...
Definitely.
Excellent. All right, next one. Did you ever think Canva wasn't going to work? Was there a moment, perhaps when you wrote yourself that letter, was there a moment when you were really worried it wasn't going to work?
So the ironic thing was, regardless of how challenging it was and how much the outer world was saying that this wasn't going to happen, I always believed it was going to happen because I wasn't going to give up ever. So I think that even though there was certainly times that the external stimuli, you'd think that maybe it wasn't going to happen because we were getting rejected from every single person we were speaking to, I think that I always deep down knew it was going to happen because I wasn't going to give up.
If you had to do it again, where would you look for a technical co-founder?
That's a great question. So it was really challenging finding our technical co-founder. It was really challenging finding our tech team. So I wish there was a silver bullet, but unfortunately I don't think that that's the case. I did everything under the sun, and it was very fortunate that something worked out and we ended up with incredible people. But I'd probably do all the same things that I did before. Unfortunately, I'd go to every single conference I could. I would go to tech events. I would go to hackathons. I would do everything you possibly can, and then try as hard as you possibly can as well. But at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily make that your only first step. I would try to actually develop things as much as you can as well. And so you're doing the vision part and the product part and the marketing part. So when you actually do find that incredible person, you have a lot to bring to the table too.
Yeah. It's kind of I describe it often as a serendipity when just two people come together and a founding team works, and there's no kind of set way that you do that. It's really meeting lots and lots of people and getting your idea out there and talking to lots of people about your idea, right? And trying to get them enthused about your idea. Again, comes back to that not keeping it secret.
Definitely.
And often when we're looking to invest, we're looking for the kinds of founders who are standing at the top of the mountain shouting their idea to anyone who will listen, because they're the kind of founders that'll probably get things done. Okay, a little one about product lifecycle and changes. So how do you approach balancing the rigor of planned releases in your product versus existing customers with loud and immediate requests for changes and they need something done? You know, it's your biggest Canva for work customer and they need something versus your already planned out record of.
It's a constant method of weighing things up. So we've had over 200,000 support tickets from our users. And so some of those things are suggestions, some of those things are ideas, some of those things are bugs. And so we have a team now who are actually going through and mapping out each of those strands so we can see when something's become an increasingly important bug. So for example, it might have been here and then all of a sudden it's risen. And then hopefully when you fix something, we were able to go, it was a big bug and then we fixed it and then all of a sudden it's decreased. And so what we're trying to do is ensure that if there's a release, for example, we fix the things that we've actually broken in that release. And then it's a constant weighing up of it to ensure that we're getting and addressing the most important things. We have fix-it days. Each team now has their own bugs that get delivered to them via email. So for example, with Canva for Work, they'll get the user voices sent to them and they have to prioritize and try and fit in the things that are affecting the most number of users. But it's a constant battle to try to make sure that we're addressing each of those pain points at the same time. But I guess if something's really important, it'll get it fixed immediately, whereas other things we have to schedule for a fix-it day later down the path.
There's a question here about culture, and it's how do you keep culture strong with 100 people? But I might just add a bit of colour. So whenever I go to the Canva office, I'm just blown away by how much fun everyone's having there. They're working hard. They're building great things, they're shipping things. How much have you thought about culture, you and the co-founding team, and how much of it was by chance?
I think both. So back in our very early days, I actually wrote down our philosophies back in about 2011, and we talked a lot about the culture that we wanted to create. But then at the same time, I think culture is actually just the way you treat people. So I've always wanted to create a company that I wanted to work in. And so that's sort of been the guiding light from the very early days. So it's been something that we've thought about a lot. Everything that we're doing, so lunches together, the way we have teams stand up every week, the way we have the little startups now because we want to ensure that there's still that culture where people feel like they can get amazing things done. All of these things, I think, reflect just wanting to create a company that we wanted to work in, not wanting to have red tape and bureaucracy, wanting to create a company that people feel like they can have a big impact, which is one of the most important things for anyone in a startup is we've got such a super talented and motivated and passionate team that the most important thing we can do is enable them to be able to achieve great things.
Carrying on for that, what is your definition of success for Canva?
That's a great question. We actually asked the team this question a little while back, and some people said when it's in everyone's hands on the internet, and other people said when we're the go-to tool for design and creation. I feel success when every team is achieving great things. That's our new definition of success.
Yeah.
So as we're all shipping great things and moving towards that vision, every time there's all sorts of different areas of success. When we see a user who's absolutely stoked with our product, or when we see someone who's used Canva to achieve great things, that's pretty awesome as well. But there's also such a long tail of things that we want to do in that vision. So hopefully as we start to tick more and more of those off, once we've realised that entire vision, I think that will be pretty successful.
I think it's fascinating just in listening to that answer that maybe 4 or 5 years ago, success for Canva would have been having the product out and having a few million users. Mm-hmm. And now your success is far more nuanced. It's around the team and how the team is creating the success. It's perhaps thinking about the drivers a lot more. How has your thinking about Canva changed from, we did talk, obviously, it's still a lot about product, but how does it change into kind of team and thinking about people, and how important are people now to Canva's story?
Yeah, in the early days when it was just a few of us, every single thing that we did was the output of the entire company. So if we wanted something done, like for example, in our very early days, I wanted to create that sample book that I said we mailed out. So it would be like, okay, let's create a sample book. And then 3 months later, I've designed the sample book and have it in envelopes. Whereas now we have 100 people, it's really important to ensure that each team is able to be successful and to leverage their talents and skills and to embed their creativity. So I spend a lot more time thinking about how can we make our teams more successful. Are we communicating effectively to our teams? Does every team know what's going on? So I write an email every Sunday to the entire team. And a lot of thinking is going into how can we most empower our team and how can we go from 100 people to a few hundred people to 1,000 people to maybe many thousands down the path and ensure that every team is able to be successful.
Fantastic. Well, we're out of time. Thank you, Melanie, very much. It's been fantastic.
Thanks for the great questions.
And a handshake.